Welcome to the second episode of the Mission Regeneration podcast. In this episode, we invited Professor Rob Roggema, who is an expert in regenerative culture and spatial planning, to discuss an important topic. How can we design regenerative cities and landscapes? And in this very interesting conversation, we discussed the importance of imagining within a long-term approach the regeneration of territories. An approach that considers the relevance of rethinking the use of land in order to increase the number of natural reserves through several incentive mechanisms, with the global aim to restore more and more habitats. We also addressed the concept of biophilic cities, that is, merging in harmony nature and the built environment, buildings, and other humanly created infrastructures within cities. And we concluded touching in the topic of the social and environmental function of property. How can property contribute also to regeneration at a local and regional level? It was a very, very good conversation, very informative one, and I invite you to listen to it and to reflect upon the topics addressed during this conversation. I also invite you to subscribe to the Mission Regeneration podcast newsletter that will address topics related to regeneration in a regular time frame, and also to subscribe to this YouTube channel to be updated regularly on new episodes of this podcast. Well, that's all. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and see you very soon. Bye-bye. Well, first of all, Professor Rob Roggema, thank you for your availability and acceptance of this invitation to share more about your work and your interest. Well, I can present you, but I believe that I will be short of definitions and short of the presentation of the work that you do. But I can start with you being a distinguished professor of regenerative culture at Escuela de Arquitectura y Diseño del Instituto Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico.
That's right.
And also visiting professor at the Queen's University of Belfast in Northern Ireland. But I know that you develop a broader scope of work. So my first question to make justice to your work is: who are you? And what is your professional and citizen path until now?
Well, to start with my professional background, I was trained as a landscape architect in the Netherlands, and I did my PhD in Delft, at the University of Technology in Delft, on the topic of climate change and climate adaptation and spatial planning. During my career and my life, I have always been working on creating a more sustainable, more resilient, and in the last couple of years, a more regenerative future for people, but also for non-human beings in cities and in landscapes. So that means that I used to work, and I still do, on different scales and different topics within that larger framework. So that can be the development of foodscapes, food landscape. It can be nature-based or nature-driven solutions for cities and landscapes. It can be water management plans and developments. And one of the things that probably is a little bit key to my work is that I always try to find a way to look in the further future and then look back to the current situation, what we need to change. Mm-hmm. Taking into account the complexities of looking into the future.
That is backcasting, like reverse engineering, right?
That's right. That's right. Backcasting, or even at a certain moment in my career, I developed the concept of backtracking. Mm-hmm. So that is We can maybe discuss that a little bit in more detail because it's quite interesting. It connects the past to the future because, as you know, we have changed our way of doing since the last couple of 100 years uh, from a balanced kind of situation to a situation that is dominated by human beings and with a lot of consequences. So what backtracking actually does is going back in history to find an equilibrium in the past. That can be different for every area, every region, but that situation gives us the inspiration how we can build on the history of that location as an inspiration for the future.
I see.
And then it becomes more like backcasting because then after developing that vision for the future based on historical knowledge, we can then go back to the present and see what we need to do in step-by-step process to reach that future.
And following on that, what you just said, and also I have to congratulate you for your recent book named Design for Regenerative Cities and Landscapes from 2022, last year, from Elsevier. And there is a particular article that you wrote that's named Regenerating a Country by Design, New Nature-Rich Netherlands. And I have to say that it is a very interesting example of that work for a specific country where the timeless is 2050, if I'm not wrong. And there is a clear process of analysis of what can be the future if we continue in the same track for the Netherlands in the long-term future. And in the application, through the application of the methodology that you just mentioned, you present some options and some possible paths of working in the present towards a regenerative Netherlands. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, sure. The plan that we developed, I developed that basically with two partners and also with help from several groups of students from the landscape department in Delft. And the idea of the project is if we continue to do the same thing as we always did, we will have problems both in housing, in the agriculture, the food system, responding or anticipating climate impacts, water problems, sea level rise. So there's a lot of things that are not, solved coherently. So every single aspect of those, there is a separate person or institution responsible for solving that specific problem. But that not generally causes a problem. When one is solved, it causes a problem in the other one. So what we try to do is to change that concept and see if we change the country in a quite rigorous way, creating around 50% of the area of the country, create nature, because nature solves several problems at the same time. It is transforming the agricultural sector because it steps away from agriculture being large scale and monoculture. It provides an environment that is very receptive to change. It can mitigate sudden change very easily. It can take up a lot of water when needed. It is providing humidity when it's dry. And it also provides a situation that we create more space for housing in the Netherlands. That is a big problem because the nitrogen problems in the Netherlands are quite significant. And that means that we have trouble building new houses for the people that need them. The big problem in this kind of thinking is always, or maybe twofold. The major thing is that everyone thinks this is too expensive. So we cannot just, take land from agriculture and then just make nature. So that is only costly. What we did in the plan is that we said if we use only 4% of the land that we change from agriculture into nature, and build the housing on that part of the land, it can be budget neutral because the land is gaining value quite a bit. And with that, in increase in value of the land, we can pay for both the compensations for the farmers as well as making the nature in that area. And the other thing is more institutional because people have trouble changing. So generally, an institution is hesitant to make this kind of big changes. So that is a problem that is not easy to overcome, especially when there is different institutions involved in this kind of transformation. So the plan,
the examples of that implementation are, I imagine, that are very few in the world. So it's not a way that
true.
you can provide evidence, physical evidence, that can demonstrate that the proposal is feasible.
Yes,
right?
That's absolutely right. It is a complete transformation of the way of thinking that we have adopted over the last decades and even centuries. That we need to be more predictive and that we need to be more controlling what we do in the landscape. In our case, we said, well, we need to step out of that treadmill of productivity and control. We need to leave a larger part of the country to nature, and nature is regenerative by nature, I would say. And that means that it can create an environment in which all the other activities can take place. And our, the findings that we had in the research was that it could be in a budget neutral way. And I think that is one of the largest barriers for people to say, do we want to have this change? Yes or no?
But considering that as foreseen for the near future, it's expected that the urban population will rise. There will be more public inhabitants in cities, in urban areas, and also considering that the case of for example, a city like a capital like Amsterdam is becoming more and more popular for expats, and the population is rising there. Considering that, also conjoining with the necessity to give more space to nature, how would it be at the end, or within this scope of thought, a regenerative city, like for example Amsterdam in the future? How do you see a regenerative city being in the near future, considering this desired intention to give more space for and respecting nature?
Yes, I think the main thing here is that a country like the Netherlands is an urban country. So you can say we have the boundary of Amsterdam strictly around where the buildings are at the moment. Or you say Amsterdam in a context of the Randstad of the Netherlands and also of the entire country is still an urban landscape. Probably you have seen those comparisons of, Los Angeles and London and Paris and the Randstad in the Netherlands, which roughly have the same size.
Exactly.
But that includes Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Utrecht, and everything in between. So that is more a spatial concept that we need to think about. The interlinkages between green or nature and where people live. And I think we should create the space for regeneration in that urban context, no matter whether it is exactly in the city, as we call it, or outside. Amsterdam is a relatively small city if you compare it to many other cities in the world. So green and nature is very close. So in that sense, nature can, regenerate itself. It will, but it also has the function of regenerating the water quality, the water quantity. It has the function of providing the energy. It has the function of providing the food for the citizen in the city. So there is a sort of interrelationship between the urban, I would say, the strict urban area and the area outside what we would call the strict urban boundary. And in our plan, we said, well, if you look at the country level, the land close to the bigger cities would probably be too expensive to transform that into nature. So that transformation of agricultural land in nature might actually happen further away from Amsterdam. But that means at the same time that and the people that want to have a house near Amsterdam, they don't want to be relocated to somewhere outside in the periphery of the country, where we have transformed that landscape into nature. And that means that we need to have some kind of exchange of land. So a land bank, so to say, on a national level, that where we change the lands from agriculture to nature in the north or in the south or in the east, that the same rule could actually be allocating the housing closer to where people want to live. And if you look at that mechanism at a national level, that could really work out very well.
And is this vision only dependent upon the will of public institutions, like, for example, the municipality, the government, or is it also dependent on and can be also be a part of an action of a corporation or a foundation or a community or a NGO? All the actors can be part of this vision and take action also together.
Yes, I think you're right. The idea is that at a regional or a sub-regional level, the actors that are there, they can work together on this transformation. So what that means is that and we have seen some examples of this type of thinking already coming up after we presented our plan, is that local communities that want to change this, sometimes even an individual farm that could transform its land into nature and allocate a couple of houses on his farmland. So we think in the plan we said this is too small, just one farm and 4 houses on the farmland, just too small to make a transition, because we need to be more quick. But at the same time, we can use the individual, let's say, communities, the somewhat larger communities, and it can be participants from different backgrounds. Sometimes it's a community that is into conservation of nature. Sometimes it's a group of people that are looking for a community of a communal housing because they are getting older and they want to live together in a nice environment. So they take the initiative for something like this. What is difficult in the spatial planning law in the Netherlands is that municipalities have the right to say what is happening where. And there is this local, let's say, agreement politically and also with, major industries, the farming community, that certain things will happen or not will happen. So if you were to have this transformation that is, for instance, instigated by people that really want to do this, the municipality is confronted with something new. And they need to be convinced first, but then also they need to convince the industries, the farmers, and everything that needs to change as a result of this transformation. And that is for many municipalities difficult mentally, but also it needs to be included in their spatial plans, and that takes time. So there are a couple of the barriers that local municipalities have to deal with.
So it's a long and perhaps slow process.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, it should be fast, and it should be not so slow as I just described. And there's I think only one kind of solution, that is there needs to be some kind of a central mechanism that people can be compensated if they change their farmland into nature.
Mhm.
That there is the possibility to exchange lands from one area to the other for certain uses, but that requires like a direction or management at a national level. So the example that I just gave about people that are wanting to live close to Amsterdam, but the land is changing into nature in the north of the country, there need to be the exchange possible, and that is difficult um, in a country where much of the politics in the recent decade has been market driven.
Mhm.
So then the market
It's
will
true.
actually
Yeah.
decide on the change, and not the goal or the communal desire to get that change done.
And you mentioned changing the uses of agricultural land to, for example, change it to conservation, so to say, and requalify it to another use. But even within the city, my question is it possible to bring more nature to the city? I'm thinking for example, of the biophilia biophilia approach within cities that is growing more and more in some cities. Thinking, for example, in Barcelona. If we go, for example, in Rotterdam or other city in the north of Europe, we are taken by a greenery that it's amazing. But
Yeah.
it's not the rule. It's not very common. Is it possible, and how can we bring this more nature to the city?
Well, I think you're right. That is not part of our out of the plan that I just you asked before. But I think we should um, go in that pathway, because cities are getting more crowded. They're getting hotter. There's more
Exactly.
droughts also in cities, and there's only one way out of that thinking, and it is increasing the amount of nature or natural conditions. And there is a lot of potential in the city that we are not using. I mean, um, if you make an analysis of cities in general, but I think this is true for many cities around. There's a lot of space just unused.
True.
One of the things that there has been a report, I think, 10 years ago, that calculated the amount of space in Amsterdam that could be used for urban agriculture, which is now not used at all, which is up to 12% of the surface area of the city.
Wow. 12%.
So
It's a
that is
lot.
quite a lot.
Yes.
And that is just there, just, unused. And it could be leftover spaces here and there. It could be spaces next to infrastructure that is not used. It could be even parking spaces that are not used that much. So there's a lot of different types of space in the city that can be transformed into nature. Only there, we don't have a program for that. In many cities, it is dependent on individual. Every city has a green plan, but most of those plans, they are looking at the existing situation and try to conserve what is already there. So there is not a very aggressive, let's say, uh, strategy to start using those spaces that are not used at the moment by anything else. And they can be used for nature, but also they can be used for urban agriculture or a combination. Like like urban food forests would be, for me, a very interesting concept to develop inside cities.
But for example, the majority, considering that within the city, of course, there are a part of those spaces are public, are from the public domain, the municipality domain, but the other part is private property. So
Yeah.
how can we convince that other part either use it to their action, or to lease it, or to loan it, or to grant it for 10 or more years to other entities to apply to make use of that unused land. Exactly. Is it possible? Is there any initiative that ongoing that tries to make that movement?
Well, yes, I think there are a couple of initiatives that are known. Maybe there are much more than I know of. But for instance, one good example is in Rotterdam, actually, that the municipality said to forgot the name. There was an urban farm and restaurant in Rotterdam, and they could use an empty space or leftover space, I think for 10 years, free of charge. So they could use the space, started a restaurant, started local growth of food, and in the end, well, it was a very sad story. In the end, they went broke anyway, but that was not dependent on the regulations or the support from the municipality. So those kind of examples could be easily could be easily used as an example for other municipalities to do the same thing. The problem often is within the municipality that there is no attention for this, because no one is really interested in leftover space. People are interested in transforming a space from, old houses into new office buildings, or, when there is a new infrastructure happening, or that kind of more, for some people, more exciting transformations. That all the attention goes to those. Well, there is a lot of, you just can lease it, and you need to make a contract with someone or a group of people that can use this as a food forest, or as create some new nature there. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, because in reality, what we are talking about, if we think it deeply, we are talking about the social or ecological function of propriety, the private propriety. So
Sure.
if we are, for example, within a city, and in that part of the street there is a vacant plot of land that used to be a building but now is a vacant city, and someone decides to construct a community garden or community park built by the inhabitants of that city, that is a social and environmental function of a city, of the place of propriety in that case. But what we are talking now, it's perhaps the regenerative function, a regenerative approach to that concept also of social function, is to see it as more than the impact that can be brought to the inhabitants of that specific place, but a broader impact of all the other inhabitants of that city, and perhaps all that country, because it's contributing to increasing the biodiversity, to increasing the quality of the air, the decrease in the temperature. So it's a scale, a wider scale than, for example, only the inhabitants of that particular state. It's a wider approach.
You're right, and I think that is also the reason that I am a little bit against this temporary contract. You can use it for 10 years, because
why is that?
I think on the longer term, we should safeguard those kind of spaces and use them in this way, because otherwise, after 10 years, it is turned back into concrete again, and then we are back on square one. So actually, so that's why I think there's two sides to this. If you have a vacant plot, the owner of that plot, if it is the municipality or a private owner, they are afraid that if something changes there and it is really great and nice, that they can never change it back to what they want.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
true.
The other side is that I think we should use all those little spaces, small, a little bit larger, even larger spaces, to create this kind of regenerative function, both socially and also ecologically. I think it's really important to create a city at a larger scale that all these places, greener spaces, are somewhat connected, but as a whole, they will improve or decrease the rise of temperatures. The humidity is benefiting from this, and there's a lot of biodiversity. Of course, it's a no brainer, and that is what we need for the long term in every city.
Mhm. So, Professor, we are almost finishing our conversation. I will just invite you, if you are keen, to share some initiatives that in all at global level manifest what we just said for the audience if they want to search more about this topic, and also possibly books, articles, or other kind of content that talks more about this topic. Of course, I would deeply recommend your book. It's a very good reading about this topic. But do you have more recommendations about this?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of course, there's a lot of things, and other books, sort of thing. But to start with the first question, what is happening is a very good example. Currently, what I am doing here in Monterrey, which is a large city of 5.5 million people in a very dry climate, and I'm starting to initiate here what I call La Ola Verde, the green wave, especially, and that aims to do exactly what we discussed just before, is to create all kinds of spaces, planting trees, doing little parks, making bigger structures in green to create a whole transformation towards a more greener city. And I think this is something that we are starting with this, but I think every city benefits from doing and creating or adopting such a strategy. So that would be one thing that is interesting. The other thing is probably to mention the work of the Y Factory in Delft with Winnie Maas. He has been working a lot on what he calls the green dip, at doing similar things like transforming buildings, built environments from the harsh and concrete it is now towards something that is green and more soft. And when it comes to books, I mean, there's a lot. I'm just looking in my. There's one very interesting book that I would recommend to everyone. That is called Low Tech.
Can you say again, please?
Low Tech. It is LO and then TEK. And there's a lot of examples and worldwide, globally, about how we can create regenerative places. Many of them are based in indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and making use of the traditional knowledge to apply it to the modern world. So that is a very interesting and very nice book. But there's a lot of there's the more obvious ones like the recent book by Paul Hawken about regeneration.
That's a good book also,
stories
yes.
in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a very nice one. And Daniel Christian Weil wrote this, I think one of the basic books for everyone who is working on regenerative culture or design. So
there is a considerable starting a considerable list to start. So yes. It's very good. Well, Professor, thank you a lot for your conversation. Thank you a lot for sharing your passion and your work. And yeah, I hope that your project in Mexico, I will start to follow. I will search for it, and I hope that it continues to go very, very with great success in the future.
Yes. Okay. You're absolutely welcome and happy to have this conversation with you.